Are we better off today than before? Whereas a majority of those born before the last century answered yes, only a quarter of those in this generation believe that to be true across developed countries. We witness record levels of economic output around the world, and we see sophisticated research coming out of universities, but the reality paints a very different picture. Chronic diseases, cost of living stresses, and poverty cycles seem to be easy to find in even the most developed corners of the globe. What is causing this contradiction? It's easy to pin these issues on systemic factors, but we should also look at the actors, those who control politics, those who control the economy, and those who control big businesses, and what they're doing that led to such calamity. I'll give you an example. It was a decision of certain nutritionists who took bribes from big agriculture to create hugely misleading food pyramids that used to encourage excessive carbohydrate consumption for people worldwide. And as a result, the epidemic of diabetes occurred over the last few decades. The irony here is, had there not been any professional making recommendations about what sort of nutrition to take in, people would likely have been better off. And so, realizing the influence of these supposedly experts, these people of influence, and how they affect the daily lives of the modern people is very important. We need to get behind the facade of professionalism and really understand why these influential people made the decisions that they did that led to rippling negative impact on the world. 2,000 years ago, an ancient philosopher and social theorist, Mozi, lived through a similar issue of his time, where despite the fast-paced technological and agricultural reform that is taking place in his era, many small princedoms were at war with one another in ancient China. He wanted to understand why technology led more to competition and to mutual destruction than towards the common good. His answer is cynicism. Cynicism is the presumption that everyone else only acts in service of their self-interest, and this becomes ever more exaggerated at times of great progress and development. Cynicism is what turned countrymen into enemies, well-intentioned individuals into schemers. Of all self-fulfilling prophecies that led to tragedies, cynicism is responsible for one of the greatest acts of evil in history. Take Adolf Hitler, who believed that Germany is under attack by invisible globalists and Jewish people. Mozi was a social theorist, and he wanted to understand human nature. He wanted to understand the roots of cynical beliefs so that he may find hope in solving and addressing and bringing order back to his society. Number one, Cynicism. Mozi says, if we do not do what is right because of cynicism, then nothing will ever be accomplished. Mozi began his critique with observations of the society around him. As someone living in the 5th century BCE, he inherited 1,000 years of early Chinese civilization. The culture he was born into was a deeply superstitious one. People believed in various forms of government-issued rituals that is meant to deify the ruling class and help impose feudal rule on people. Chief among them is the notion of the mandate of heaven, which legitimizes the political rule of a sovereign as preordained by divine forces. Such innovation worked to great effect in subordinating people to their sovereign. Even as the early Chinese dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, was disintegrating, people still held on to this superstitious obedience to their rulers and partook in wars between princedoms, seeing that as their duty. Despite their outward protestations for war, these peasants still tolerated the conscriptions and taxations levied upon them. He noticed something. Mozi highlighted the tendency of these warmongering princes to echo and emphasize such beliefs. The rulers themselves justify their wars of aggression by alluding to the necessity of striking foes when they are weak in order to neutralize future threat. To this, Mozi commented, "The chaos in the world is due to belief in fate. The thief says, 'It is my fate,' and the murderer says, 'It is my fate.'" He further observed that this cynical mindset permeated all aspects of the peasant life. Beyond state actions, people were making excuses for themselves, whether it be poverty or hunger. According to Mozi, some say, "My poverty or wealth, longevity or early death are all determined by fate. What use is there in making an effort?" Mozi stated how Shun, an early Chinese ruler of great benevolence, were born into a poor and difficult family. He worked diligently to cultivate virtue and ultimately rose to become a revered ruler. He argued that if Shun had believed in fate, he would not have worked to improve his circumstances and achieve greatness. It is easy to see through the falsehood of these beliefs in fate as modern people. But Mozi also prophesies that regardless of intellectual development, it is easy for a cynical belief to permeate itself in subtle ways. Consider the following beliefs that are in vogue in the modern day. Number one, everyone is self-motivated. Hence, someone engaging in compassionate acts must have ulterior motives. Number two, real change exists only in the material realm. Therefore, all social progress must come in the form of law and legislative reforms. There is no use in aiming for spiritual enlightenment in others, since they cannot be trusted. These two notions sometimes appear self-evident to many of us, just as the existence of tree spirits appeared self-evident to our ancestors. These are not scientific facts. They do not explain how good people like Nelson Mandela, Joan of Arc, and the Buddha himself existed and changed the world. And they do not explain how the recent case of Luigi Mangione, who put himself in potential life sentence in order to take down a greedy CEO of a health insurance company. There are good people in this world, and the cynical beliefs that everyone is self-motivated simply is not true. The fact is that these beliefs exist to deride, trivialize, and cheapen every moral instinct. These beliefs have particular consequences for our society. First, the narrative that everyone is self-motivated is used extensively to sow distrust against charitable individuals. We say politicians who fight against the status quo must be doing it to accrue power for themselves. This betrays a worldview devoid of faith in humanity. Secondly, we also believe that material redistribution is the only way that we could fight against wealth inequality, even if doing so destroys mutual trust and creates resentment. The fact is, legal code is designed only to protect us in unusual circumstances. It does not change people and human nature. Therefore, the fixation over legal battles is fundamentally unsuccessful, for it is motivated by a lack of trust in our fellow brothers and sisters. A house of cards cannot stand strong. According to Mozi, the entire enterprise of successful civilization building is grounded on belief in one another and the moral instinct inherent to each human being. He recognizes that every good thing, every public act, arose not from selfish bids for power, but subtle moral instincts that motivated individuals to act on their goodwill and towards charity. To Mozi, the awareness of our freedom to pursue our own ideal is a first step to social change. Second step is to have a direction. What is the direction of a civilization? What is its destiny? Mozi urged us to examine history. He said how in China itself, the civilization began when an ancient sage king by the name of Yu the Great, successfully engineered a canal system to control flood. Rather than hoarding this technology to himself or his village, he ordered its construction in surrounding regions so that neighboring tribes could also be protected from flood. In doing so, he actually negated future incursion from surrounding tribes who were able to adopt an agrarian lifestyle and were eventually absorbed into his administration. The act of impartial generosity is recurrent in the founding myths of civilizations across the globe. Hammurabi, in uniting the lands of the Mesopotamian plains, declared the rule of law to apply to all citizens, whether or not they were victors in prior wars. The stories of Ashoka of India, Solon, and Cyrus all have within them deliberate acts of compassion. It was a conscious decision of individuals in a position of strength to share their fruits of labor, rather than press on their strength for selfish gains that pushed humanity away from endless cycle of tribal conflicts into the embrace of civilization. In the complex geopolitics of today, it is easy to be blinded by national or ethnic pride in assessing contemporary events. However, without a clear moral framework for understanding civilization, it is very easy for citizens and leaders they elect to descend into tribal power mongering. Division and hatred is what usually gets votes. It is thus not hard to see why Mozi searched so earnestly for an objective standard to understand good and evil. According to Mozi, the definition of morality is as essential as measurement tools is to the assemblage of a furniture. He says, just as a carpenter uses compass to measure things, even if the craftsman is unskilled, he cannot go wrong. Just like Plato, Mozi was concerned with characterizing the ideal sovereign. What should be the job description of a ruler? Unlike Plato, Mozi saw the hallmark of good governance not in superior intellect of the ruler, but their universal compassion for the people. Competence is important, but the moral courage to defer to the judgment of the people and to always have their best interests at heart are what truly set a good leader apart. Mozi says, when those above and those below can communicate without obstruction, the state will be orderly. A ruler who consults the people and aligns with their needs ensures that the country thrives. A good sovereign, like the sky, according to Mozi, seeks to benefit all of those they are entrusted with in equal earnestness, no matter their status, wealth, or kin relations. It is this commitment to buck the trend of tribalism and competition that characterizes the civilized sovereign. To Mozi, the human striving to better the lots of others, to achieve mutual benefit, is the definition of civilization. This notion differs from the philosophy of utilitarianism put forward by Jeremy Bentham, which defines moral action as one that brings about the greatest amount of good to the greatest amount of people. Mozi's morality is less concerned with the quantification of outcome, more about the quality of the act, that is, its impartiality. It has important implications for the kind of political arrangement that stem from this philosophy. Consider the trolley problem. You happen to be at the lever when you witness a trolley rolling down a lane with 5 people tied to the track. If you flip the lever, the trolley will be redirected to a different track, where only a single person lays on the track. You would be able to save 5 people, but jeopardize the life of a single innocent individual. Would pulling the lever be a moral thing to do? In the utilitarian perspective, it would be the moral choice to flip the lever because you would be saving more lives. However, this notion lends credence to communistic ideologies that seek to redistribute resources to maximize overall utility. In contrast, Mozi's framework of mutual benefit and impartial care cannot see this act as moral. it would be fair to say that Mozi, in his ardent support for individual benefit, will be ardent opponents to communism and totalitarianism. Similarly, Mozi's thought can also be said to contrast with the current capitalist system in that it does not aggravate or aggrandize the self. The acquisition of resources for oneself is not inherently good because it only benefits one person. So what constitutes a good moral action? Publicly beneficial projects such as building roads or installing a traffic light, which increases the welfare of all motorists, or performing fundamental scientific research, which increases future developmental capacity, constitute a moral action in Mozi's lens. This worldview is why Mohism, anomalous of all ancient Chinese philosophies, are particularly prolific in their scientific research, producing up to 70 treatises on physics, geometry, and logic.